this is my Azor the Lawbringer list, and he's a really cool commander. He reads, he's flying, he's a 6/6 for 6, 2 white, 2 blue. He can be kind of hard to cast. When he enters the battlefield, each opponent can't cast instant or sorcery spells during that player's next turn. So he pretty much sticks around, and then whenever he swings in, you can pay white and 2 blue and X, and if you do, you gain X life and draw X cards, which is Sphinx's Insight is the card that's emulating. So he's cool. I like him because if he comes around and sticks around for a turn, he can usually draw you like 3 or 4 cards, which really can start getting you back into the game. Because 4 cards is quite a bit. Gains 4 life too, so that's nothing to scoff at. And you can, if you take his enter the battlefield's ability, and you really start to break that ability by flickering him, like having him enter the battlefield, exiling him, returning to the battlefield, that happens again. So you can kind of shut your opponent out of 2 card types for the rest of the game if you really start to take and break that ability. I usually don't. I usually kind of play him just at face value as a big dumb flyer that can get us back in the game by drawing us cards, gaining us a little incremental amount of life to help us win the race, and overall, like, win the war of attrition. So here we go. Authority Councils, you know it, you love it. Creatures your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped, and then whenever they do enter the battlefield, you gain 1 life. This card is completely unfair. You play it because it's unfair. This is like one of the strongest cards in the entire game, period. Like, it's not fair how good this card actually is. Surprisingly enough, we don't have Fractured Reality in this list, Fragmented Reality. It's because I don't think it existed yet. Braider's Humiliation. Target creature perpetually loses all abilities. That's basically why we play this. And then it deals damage to target creature based on the amount of creatures you control. Cards again, it's unfair. You play it because it's unfair. The perpetually losing all abilities shuts off a lot of creatures and makes them pretty much nothing burgers, and that's always really good. So if it's just sitting there doing nothing, a lot of times like a Blood Artist or something like that comes down and you play it because of its ability, and it's sitting there doing nothing, that's good enough on its own, you know, because then it's just a 0/1 nothing. And that's why you play it. Swords Plowshares, again, you love it, you see it. See it in every white deck. We're not even going to go over it. Annul, encounters target artifact or enchantment spell. I play this mainly for like Golos and Eskia decks because it counters them for 1 mana. So if you really can't stand those decks like I can't, play that card. Fading Hope bounces a creature. If its mana value is 3 or less, you scry 1. Card's pretty strong. Wash Away counters a commander for 1 mana or any card that doesn't come from the hand, and you can cleave it for 3 mana and counter cards that come from the hand. That's what it does. You play it because it's good. Kind of unfair. Why you play it? Gadia, Font of Hope, Flying Vigilance. Creatures enter with 1/1 counters relative to the amount of angels you already have in play as you cast that creature. And it can tap for 1 mana, a white mana, and you can only spend it on angel spells. So she ramps out angels, she makes angels bigger. Angels are my favorite creature type overall. Kabira Takedown, it's a white source that comes into play tapped. Otherwise, it's 2 mana, deal damage to target creature, equal to the amount of creatures that you have. So, it's one of those like gang up damage spells. You'll see quite a few of those in white. We'll call those gang up spells. Blink of an Eye, it bounces a non-land permanent, and if you kick it, you draw a card as well. Counterspell, pay 2 mana, counter target spell. Disdainful Stroke, counter target spell with mana value 4 or more. Inballs, look at the top 4 cards of your library. You pick one, you put it in your hand. This is the instant version of Shimmer of Possibility. Now, I wouldn't blame you for playing Shimmer of Possibility. It's like my favorite Magic art. But this is just the strictly better version because it's an instant. But they're both really good cards. And we got our next card being Jacob Hawken. He draws you cards if you tap him, and then you exile cards underneath him, and if you use his ability and pay 6, he transforms into Hawken's Insight. In each of your turns, at the start of your turn, you exile your top card of your library and put it underneath Hawken's Insight. And any of the cards you have exiled underneath Hawken's Insight, once per turn you can play one of those for free or play a land. So he's really good. He allows you to free cast stuff, get you extra draws. For 1 Priority Disruption, it's a blue source, and then it counters target spell unless its controller pays 1. I think this card is pretty terrible. I was just playing it because I wanted to try it out. A lot of those counter target spell unless its controller pays like 1. They're really easy way to buy their way out of. Search for Escanta. At the beginning of your upkeep, you surveil 1. Then if 7 or more cards in your graveyard, it transforms into the Sunken Ruin. And you can pay 3 and tap it, and it looks for an instant or sorcery, like the top 4 cards of your library, and you put it into your hand. Or it's a non-creature, excuse me. Which this card's insane. Probably the best card in Standard at its time period. Always knowing what you're going to draw. Always having like a way to draw an extra card for 4 mana, because it's 3 and tapping it, so it's 4 total. And it being, 5 out of 6 card types, nothing's better. I mean, this card's insane. Definitely pick it up. It was the best card in Standard for a reason at a time. You could literally just turtle up with this card and constantly accrue value. So, once you stabilized, it pretty much always made sure that you kept ahead of your opponent. Dovin's Veto, it's a negate, except it can't be countered. It counters target non-creature spell, and it can't be countered itself. So some would say it's strictly better than negate. I wouldn't say that because it's harder to cast. As Arcane Signet, it's a mana rock, and it produces your commander's colors. Mind Stone, it's a mana rock, except it produces colorless, so you can't use it to pay colored mana. You can pay 2, sacrifice to draw a card. Angel of the Eternal Dawn, again, you'll see this card in a lot of my lists. It counters ramp, because they can't play cards with greater than the current turn count. Stopping day and night cycle thing is rarely ever relevant. Banishing Light, it's a binding enchantment. You play it, tuck a card from your opponent's side of the field underneath it, and they can release it from bondage by removing the enchantment. These are called O-Ring effects. We don't have Oblivion Ring in Arena, but it's the exact same card, because Borrowed Time, which is in this list as well, it's the next card coming up. It's the exact same card, it just has a different name. That means you can play the same effect more than once. That's why it's done like that, because Commander is a singleton format. You can only play one of each card name, unless it's a basic land. Resplendent Angel, you'll see that in a lot of lists. It's a good win con. If you get into the later game, it can keep producing tokens, keep making an army in a can, is what those types of abilities are called. Nefarious Protection, it gives you protection from everything. Your life total can't change, and all your permanents phase out. So basically, phasing means that they're treated as though they don't exist. So they dodge things like board wipes, removal, damage. It just keeps you safe for 1 turn. 1 turn, it just says you can't be defeated. That's idealistically when you use this card, either to dodge a board wipe, or you're on the verge of a defeat, and you just cast it and then just get an extra turn. That's what it's for. About as protection spell as it gets. Clear the Mind, this is just kind of a little favorite of mine. It's not super great. Target player shuffles their graveyard into their library, and then you draw a card. You get to recast your whole library again, so if you got 30 cards in your graveyard, you get to replay them all because you put them right back in your library, nice, safe, and sound, and it draws you a card. It's a bit of an inefficient, and it's a sorcery. That means you can only play when you have priority on your turn, unless you have a card that states otherwise. I have an old Jeskai deck that I used to mainboard this card, and that was the whole concept of the deck. It would just basically play a bunch of removal spells and constantly reshuffle them and just kind of force our opponent to concede by removing all their stuff. Sinister Sabotage, counter target spell, surveil 1. Again, surveil, look at the top card of your library. You can put it into your graveyard or keep it up top. Witness the Future, target player shuffles up to 4 target cards from their graveyard into their library. You look at the top 4 cards of your library, then put one of those cards into your hand. The rest on your bottom of the library in random order. That card's pretty sweet. Dovin Grand Arbiter, his +1 is he gains a loyalty counter, and then whenever one of your creatures deals combat damage to a player, he gets a loyalty counter for each one that dealt damage. He can make a 1/1 flyer and gain 1 life, and then his -7 is like a super anticipate effect, where you look at the top 10 cards of your library, grab 3 of them, put them into your hand. When I say an anticipate effect, it's look at X cards from your library, grab an X amount of them, put them into your hand. Because that's what the first card in this game ever to do something like that is called anticipate. So his ultimate's a super anticipate. Does it win you the game right away? No, but he's also 3 mana. It pretty much can if you can get like certain combos and stuff. It can. There's a certain few combo cards I could play to make that ultimate a little bit more impactful. I just don't. But I'll make a little bit more like competitive lists in the future that are like, oh, this list is just for strictly winning the game. This is mean. This is powerful. This is not for fun. This is we're playing best in slot stuff. We're trying to win the game here. Get over it. Deferious Contingency, I just kind of felt like playing this card. Counter target spell, and then each spell in its controller's graveyard, hand, wherever, pretty much wherever besides exile, gains it perpetually costs 2 more to cast. If you use this on commanders, they get an extra 2 to cast forever. That's why we run this. But this is more of a constructed card. Against like decks that run like 3 or 4 ofs of a card, you Deferious Contingency them, and then every single copy of them costs more to cast. Replicating Ring is one of our mana rocks in the list. You'll see this in a lot of lists. Again, I recommend as a mana rock package. It's almost always grab Replicating Ring. It pops open and then it gets 8 of them. Skyclave Relic is indestructible. You can kick it, get 3 of them instead of just 1. The Celestis, it's good for a day and night deck. It's actually mandatory for a day and night deck. It shifts it from day to night, night to day. And then when that happens, you draw and discard a card and gain 1 life. And you can draw and discard. You don't have to, but you still gain the life. Adds 1 mana of any color. Ajani's Strength of Pride. He's a planeswalker that puts out Ajani's Pride mates, as you can see here. Whenever you gain life, you put a 1/1 counter on him. His +1 gains you life for each creature and planeswalker you have. And then his his 0, if you have 15 more life than your starting life total, so 40 in Brawl, you exile all your opponent's artifacts and creatures. It's a one-sided board wipe for artifacts and creatures. So he's a pretty excellent planeswalker. Ajani's Pride mates, they can incrementally get bigger whenever you gain life, so eventually they can be like 5/5s and 6/6s and stuff like that. And once they get to that point, they can go toe-to-toe with pretty much any creature and either trade, come out on top. So that's what you want to see. So, and he can make, at face value, he can make 2 of those before even plussing 1 time. So, he's an army in a can. He's just a good planeswalker. He's really good in Super Friends decks because he provides you just a really good creature token. Sarah the Benevolent. This card's not really that great. It's only really good in Flyers list. Creatures you control flying get 1/1 until end of turn, so it's a flying anthem. And then she makes a Sarah's Angel, which is the flying vigilance 4/4 angels. And then her -6 is if you control a creature, you get an emblem that you can't lose the game as long as you control a creature. So even if you're at -50 life, you don't get defeated because you have a creature. So that's pretty good. But she's not really that great of a planeswalker to be all. If we're like really actually taking her into consideration. But she's not bad either. So I'm just saying if you don't have her, you don't need to craft her. It's not like, oh, I'm gonna run out and craft this card real quick. Like, you don't have to do that. It's not that big of a deal. Wandering Emperor, probably one of the better cards from Kamigawa. She has flash, so you can play her at instant speed. And then if you flash her in, you can use her loyalty abilities as though they were instant speed for that 1 turn. And her +1 gives a creature a 1/1 counter, it gives it first strike. Her -1 makes a vigilance 2/2 samurai with vigilance. And then her -2 exiles target tap creature and you gain 2 life. So she can kind of come down, ambush an attacking creature, remove it from play, and gain you a little bit of life. Consuming Tide, it bounces all non-land permanents besides the one you and your opponents choose. You and your opponent each choose 1, bounce the rest, and then if they have a greater hand size than you do after that resolves, you draw a card. So it's an excellent board wipe. It's only 4 mana. It can help restabilize everything, which is what you want to see, especially for 4 mana. Next card on the list is Devious Cover-Up. The counter spell that when it counters something, it exiles it instead of putting it in the graveyard. Then you can grab 4 cards from your graveyard, shuffle them back into your library. There's a little bit bit of like deck recursion with this list. It kind of counters mill and it allows us to reuse certain cards because we can peel through the deck pretty quickly. Drawn from Dreams, I play this card mainly for its art, but it's a super anticipate. Look at the top 7 cards, you grab 2 of them and put it into your hand. Now there's like a better one coming up overall in a nutshell called Memory Deluge, but I still like this card because A, at face value it's fast. It's not as good though as Memory Deluge because it's a sorcery, but its pros over Memory Deluge is that it always grabs 7. Like Memory Deluge, you can't copy it because it has to be had mana spent onto it. Mama's Awakening's a draw enchantment. When you put it down, if you have the city's blessing, only you draw cards. Otherwise, at the beginning of your upkeep, you and all your opponents draw a card. Memory Deluge, look at the top X cards of your library where X is the amount of mana spent to cast this spell. Put 2 of them to your hand, and the rest on the bottom of the library in random order. So first, since it's 4 mana, it looks 4 deep, and then if you flash it back, which means you pay the flashback cost and cast it from your graveyard, it allows you to look 7 deep, like Drawn from Dreams. It basically becomes Drawn from Dreams. That's why this card is overall better, just a better card, because you get to use it twice. That's what makes it a lot better than Drawn from Dreams in about 90% of situations. But Drawn from Dreams does have like a few niche advantages. Whelming Wave, this bounces all creatures except sea monsters being krakens, leviathans, octopuses, and serpents. So I call those sea monsters. It's a pretty good board wipe. It's only 4 mana, so it bounces all creatures, which it returns your stuff so you can reuse ETB triggers. Pretty decent card, it's a rare, so maybe you want to pick it up in an ETB bounce deck. Fairy Time Raveler, this card got nerfed in this game. This used to be 3 mana. This card's completely unfair. Your opponent can only cast spells at sorcery speed. +1, you can cast sorceries at instant speed. And then, it's -3. Bounces target artifact, enchantment, or creature, and you draw a card. This card is absolutely mental. Completely broke the game when it came out. It was one of the most ubiquitous cards that we've seen in a very long time. There's only a few cards that are probably more controversial than this card. Fairy Who Slows the Sunset, this card's insane. His +1, you target a land, creature, and an artifact, untap yours, and tap your opponent's, gain 2 life. Completely insane. His -2 is an Anticipate. I think it's only top 3. Yeah, it's the top 3. It's Anticipate. Look at top 3 cards, put 1 of them in your hand, the rest in your bottom of your library. And his -7 is, during each of your opponent's upkeeps, you untap all your permanents along with them and draw a card. So his ultimate can pretty much win you the game, because you're getting card advantage, you're untapping, you can freely tap down your entire mana base and then still be ready for your opponent's turn to hold up counter spells and instants. Cleansing Nova, you see this in every whitelist that I run. Pop all creatures or pop all artifacts and enchantments. Doomscar, it's a pop all creatures board wipe, except you can foretell it, so it's 5 mana, so you can foretell, you can pay 2 earlier, and then play it for 3. So you can kind of play it in installments, which makes it really good. Herald of Vengeance, when he comes into play, every creature that dealt damage to you last turn gets popped and gets sent to the graveyard. Oh, as a permanent, so it can even be enchantments that deal damage to you and such. Lair Dawnbringer has flying, first strike, lifelink. Other angels you control get 1/1 and have lifelink. We play her because she gains us a bunch of life. She's pretty hard to deal with for certain decks. Teferi Temporal Pilgrim, he gains loyalty every time you draw cards. His 0 is draw a card. His -2, he creates an Ajani's Pridemate spirit token that whenever you draw a card, you put a 1/1 counter on that creature. When I say Ajani's Pridemate, he gets a 1/1 counter when you meet a certain stipulation. His -12, your opponent bounces one of their permanents, and then each one of their non-land permanents gets shuffled back into their deck. Wiretapping has Hideaway 5, and then whenever you draw your first card during your turn, you draw an additional card, and then if you have 9 cards in hand, you can play the Hidden Away card. Hideaway 5 means you look at the top 5 cards, tuck one of them underneath the card, and then when you meet its stipulation, you play the card for free. Card's alright. I played it because I just wanted another double draw enchantment. It's alright. Also, Teferi, when it comes into play, you can flicker one of your permanents you control. You can use Planeswalker abilities twice instead of once per turn, each Planeswalker. Most of the time you can only use your Planeswalkers once per turn. Also, Teferi allows you to use them twice. So this is like a Super Friends linchpin card. Teferi Hero Dominaria. His +1 is you draw a card, and then at the beginning of your end step, you untap 2 lands. His -3 is put target non-land permanent into its owner's library third from the top. His -8 is when you get an emblem. Whenever you draw a card, you can exile a permanent your opponent controls. Farewell, you've seen it before. Valkyrie Harbinger, you've seen it before in the other list, so I'm not going to go over it. Blood of Tears, you bounce all non-land permanents, and if you bounce 4 non-token permanents that you controlled, you can free cast a card from your hand. Morning Canaan, he can draw 2 cards, then put a card from your hand on the bottom of your library, and then he can create a dog illusion that's twice as big as your hand size. So if you have 6 cards in hand, he has a 12/12, and so on. And then his -10 is exchange your hand and library, then shuffle. You get an emblem, you get no maximum hand size, so you get to draw your entire library. He's alright. I mean, I mainly play him for his dog, because his dog is huge. Like, if you have, you know, like a 12/12 dog, like that's gonna win the fight against anything, pretty much. River's Rebuke, pointed at your opponent, bounce all their non-land permanents. Dream Trawler has flying and lifelink, and then whenever you draw a card, it gains 1 attack, and then whenever it swings, it draws a card, and then you can discard a card and give it hexproof. Ugin the Ineffable causes colorless spells to cost 2 less to cast. He makes a 2/2 spirit that tucks a card underneath it. When it gets removed, it gets placed in your hand. And then he can pop a target permanent that has 1 or more colors. Angel of the Dire Hour has flash flying. When she comes into play, she exiles all attacking creatures. So she's like Settle the Wreckage, except without the huge downside. She's a 5/4 flying angel. Pretty good card. She's just 7 mana, so she's expensive. Mirror's Call is a white source, and it comes into play tapped unless you pay 3. Or you can pay 7, create 2 4/4 flying angels, and all your creatures gain indestructible that are non-angels. Seraph of the Sky's Blade gives your whole flying team indestructible. She's flying 7/7 with lifelink, has an alternate casting cost that we never use in this deck. Sierra's Emissary, when he comes into play, you name a card type, you and creatures you control get protection from that type of card. Seagate Restoration, it draws a card. It draws cards equal to our current hand size +1, and then you get no maximum hand size for the rest of the game for 7 mana, or it's a blue source. Platinum Angel, flying, you can't lose the game and your opponents can't win the game. If she's out, she just completely prevents you from losing in any way, shape, or form. She's pretty cool, she's pretty easy to deal with though. Undo Inversion, pop all non-land permanents. Vanquish the Horde, pops all creatures, and it costs 1 less for each creature in play. Tosses Intervention, look at top X cards of your library, put 2 of them into your hand, the rest of your library in the bottom of the random order. And its second half counters spells unless your opponent pays twice X.
Alright, this match is a loss. We're up against Canivis, and it's Slimefoot and Squeak. Slimefoot and Squeak can like reanimate creatures. Is basically what the card does. It's actually really insane. I gotta play a deck around that. I haven't played one. We go ahead and play our Miria's land. It's a white source unless we play Free Life. We opted not to ban Free Life. We start off strong with a 1/1 Death Bonnet Sprout. That card eventually turns into a 3/3 if you have 3 or more creatures in your graveyard. Then it can gobble up creatures from the graveyard, and if it does, it gains a 1/1 counter. Swings in for 1. Thinks about it. They have a green and a black up. Thinks about it. Eventually they might do something. We're waiting on them. So, they must have stepped away. They have to not do anything. We go ahead and clear the mind here. We do it to just draw the card. I don't think we have a graveyard yet. We don't. Draw Ugin the Ineffable. It's too early for him to come down. Eventually he can come down. Death Bonnet Sprout keeps loading their graveyard. straight into your graveyard. Or I can go into exile too, but mostly it means going into your graveyard. They send the 1/1 our direction. Eventually hoping to turn that to the Hulk. They don't. Maybe not, because they kind of need the mill. Instead of wasting the mana and just saying go, we go ahead and try and get rid of the 1/1 here. Because it's good for them to load the graveyard because they're a reanimator list. A reanimator list event attempts to put creatures into the graveyard and then pull them out of the graveyard. Usually creatures, sometimes you can reanimate like artifacts or instants or sorceries, but that's what the list attempts to do. They play Acolyte of Affliction here. What that card does is when it enters play, it can mill the top 2 cards of your opponent's library, or your library if you're playing it, and you return a permanent to your hand. They play a green source, a red and a green source, Defense of the Heart. What Defense of the Heart does is if we have 4 or 3 creatures on our side of the board, it sacrifices itself at the start of their turn, and then they can tutor up. Tutor up means like they just grab a string from their deck. They can tutor up 2 creatures. So it pretty much wins the game on the spot if it cracks. Because there's a lot of like infinite combos you can grab. There's other types of creatures you can grab. It usually, more often than not, it's probably going to win you the game. Blink of an Eye. We go ahead and blink of an eye their commander, sending it back to the hand. It's about to trigger because they're about to get sap rolling when it comes into play. But that's part of the reanimation effect. They have to sacrifice one of their sap rolling guys. The 1/1 that they spawned right there, they have to be able to sacrifice one of them to use his reanimation effect. Like, Slimefoot and Squee is just really, really good. I gotta play him sometime. I just haven't played him yet, but he's extremely good. We're really far behind on lands here. Like, really, really far behind. So we go ahead and minus the Teferi. Yeah, we're bouncing the Acolyte of Affliction, which is not going to do us any favors, but we're just feverishly trying to get lands here. If we would have got lands here, we would have been fine. But you'll notice throughout most of this match, we just don't really end up with too much mana, which is bad. We go ahead and make another sap rolling by playing their commander from their hand. They're consistently hitting land drops, feeling good about themselves. We're not feeling so good about ourselves so much because we keep missing land drops. We go ahead and send a 1/1 on our Teferi. It survives. Because one of the bonuses of that is it did get a buff and it getting nerfed by costing 4 mana. They did buff its loyalty by 1. So they're thinking here. Thinking about playing cards, doing stuff and things. So we're waiting. We'll hold the Multiverse. We go ahead and counter that with the Disdainful Stroke. What the Disdainful Stroke does is it counters target spell with mana value 4 or greater. We'll hold the Multiverse. You mill 10 cards from each library, and then you pick a creature or a planeswalker from among the milled cards, or even in the graveyard that was there prior, and put them onto the battlefield on your side of the battlefield under your control. We finally hit our 5th land. Like I said, we've been really behind on lands this whole time. That's really what's getting us here. And sometimes we call that in the business magic. You're getting Magic the Gathering. It just happens. Not much you can do about it. Because we are playing 40 lands in this deck. We are playing mana rocks, so sometimes you just don't get everything you want out of life. So we go ahead and grab a white source here because we're going to need it probably for board wipes and things of that nature. Because we got Herald of Vengeance in hand, and remember he can remove permanents that dealt damage to us last turn. They play Nyxbloom Ancient. This pretty much signs our defeat warrant because he triples the amount of mana they produce from all their sources. Every single source that they tap mana for, they produce triple the amount of mana. Terra Herald of Vengeance put in work there, getting rid of their whole team pretty much. But like I said, they got triple mana, so they're just about to go off. We just go ahead and concede here. Good game, opponent. Thanks for playing. Appreciate you.
Alright, we're up against Stars. They're playing Orthova. They're playing Amalia. and whenever you gain life, she explores, and then when she explores 20 times, she does something special. I'll tell you here in a moment because I'm going to hover over her. She pops all other creatures if you hit 20 or more explorers, which is pretty good. They go ahead and make a food token with Gumdrop Poisoner. She can remove creatures if you gain life, based on how much life you gain. She gives them -X, and she can make food tokens, which initially gain you 3. We click off their commander so we can see. Play Angel of the Eternal Dawn. Again, that makes it day, and it stops ramp decks by only allowing them to cast cards with the mana value equivocal to the turn count. Or less. They can do or less. Anyways, she enters play. What Explore does is you look at the top card of your library. If it's a land, you put it into your hand. If it's a non-land, you can put it into your graveyard, and the exploring creature gets a 1/1/1 counter. So I gotta try this commander. I'll probably play her within like a week or 2 if I end up with her. If not, I'm definitely gonna craft her and eventually try her sometime because she's a life gain payoff. I play life gain. I played life gain before it was cool in this game. Back when life gain was like a rogue deck. A rogue deck means that like it's a good deck. It can compete, but it's not common. That's what, when somebody says a rogue deck, that's what they're talking about. It kind of does its own thing from the meta decks, but usually they can counter one of the meta decks in some way, shape, or form, or their strategy does. Because I played life game back when mono red was big, and it still is, and that kind of counters mono red. We go ahead and play our Teferi Hero Dominaria here. We draw a card, and then at the beginning of the end step, we untap 2 lands. This card's insane. This card gives a lot of old arena players some sort of PTSD, because this card was real back in the day. Back in the day, Esper Control, which is white, blue, and black, was probably one of the best decks. We untap 2 blues here because we need the 2 blues for counterspell. They go ahead and Infernal Grasp our Angel. We go ahead and counterspell, say nah dog. We're keeping her around. We want to protect our Teferi. Because if we protect him, if you turtle up with him long enough, he wins you the game. So that's why you do that. So otherwise we probably would have just let our Angel go because she wouldn't really matter all that much. Alright, our opponent's thinking. They play a creature which causes them to gain life twice, so that Emilia, she gains life, or explores twice. Alright, if her power becomes 20, so you can explore multiple times. One way to break this card would be like counters doublers, which I think there's a few colorless ones. But if her power becomes 20, she pops all other creatures again. She seems like a really good commander. I do definitely want to try her out. Cleansing Nova, wiping out their board of creatures, because we don't have any creatures, so it's only one-sided. Go ahead and wipe out their whole team. Feeling pretty good about ourselves. We go ahead and lose 3 life because of that guy's effects. Whenever they lose creatures via getting popped, we go ahead and lose life for each one of them. Mind you, lose life effects can't be stopped. And then just scoop here because we got Teferi down.
Alright, this is up against another monster. This one's a win as well. Another monster's playing Gex, Yawgmoth Praetor. He's a mono black commander that he can discard cards and then steal cards from our library, and he can cast them all. That's like after he's got like 8 mana though. Otherwise, he's a 3 mana 3/3. I think he's got a keyword. Actually, maybe he doesn't. But whenever one of their creatures deals damage, they can pay 1 life and draw a card. They hit us with Mind Spike. Abyss of Oblivion, which if you check that card, it can return a creature from your graveyard to your battlefield. And we make another Doctor. We opt to hold back because we kind of want to keep our Dovin around. Because otherwise he will be destroyed and sent to the graveyard. He takes another hit because he's only at 1 loyalty. So they're thinking here, they play a land, play a Horrible Sword, that gives 2 attack and death touch, and then it's got a special ability where if the equipped creature makes contact with us, they can pay 8 mana and we instantly lose the game. So, it is an alternate win condition. It's a pretty cool card, honestly. Castle Vale here, we spend a bunch of mana to make a guy. Just a 1/1 lady. I'm gonna play Azor here. They can't cast in some sorceries. Their next turn, we use Dovin's effect to gain 1 loyalty. We send 1 Doctor, because it'll put him back up. A loyalty back up to 3. Remember his effect, he pluses 1, and then he gains a loyalty. Out here, they draw, and then they concede. So good game, opponent. Thanks for playing.
Alright, this is a win as well. We're up against Slinky609. They're playing Maja, Guard Protector. He is a 5-mana 2/3 that anthems each other creature you control, giving him 1+1+. And he's got landfall, and he makes a dude. So we go ahead and play our land, play Authority of the Councils. Again, the card's unfair. All of our opponent's creatures come into play tapped, and then you gain 1 life for each one that comes into play. Card's unfair. It's just like one of the strongest cards in like any card game, period. Like, for its efficiency. It's just a strong card throughout any of the card games. Again, our lands are coming to play are tapped, so we can't use them. That's the weakness of some of these like special lands, is they got abilities, but they also come into play tapped, so that's something you have to keep in mind. Because you don't want to play stuff behind curve, otherwise you can lose the game because of that stuff. We'll go ahead and play the Celestis here. It does the day and night thing, because it introduces the day and night mechanic. They play Smothering Tithe. And we draw, see it pauses there because it's like, oh hey, hold up, Smothering Tithe, do you want to pay the 2? We're like, nah. And then they get a treasure token. Go ahead and play Azor here. Azor comes down, uses his ability, which is free because it's an ETB. Means when he enters the battlefield, X happens. And that's that they can't cast instances or sorceries during this turn. So, they're thinking Anointed Procession doubles the amount of tokens that they get. Avacyn's Pilgrim is a mana dweeb. It's a green creature that taps for white. We put Herald of Vengeance into the graveyard. Then we pull him back out. Because he is a 4/5 flyer. That whenever any of their permanents damages us, if he gets played during that next turn, if any of their permanents damage us during the next turn he gets played, he removes those permanents and sends them to the graveyard. He pops them all. We draw a bunch with Azor, so they get a bunch of treasure tokens. But I mean, yeah, they got a bunch of mana. We opt to draw the card here. Then we're thinking, because we got a discard now. We go ahead and discard Blink of an Eye. And then they get another mana. It doesn't matter at this point, they're getting a bunch of mana. That only matters if they got stuff to spend it on, so they don't have a draw source. They finally get rid of our Authority of the Councils. That's fine, it gets us a land. So, it's arguably better anyways. You just play Authority of the Councils because it's fundamentally an unfair card. Like, every single white list should play that card, period. They play Maja here. Gain a life. They play the One Ring. This is from, like, Lord of the Rings. What this card does is it gives you protection from everything you, the player. And then you can pay 1 and tap it and draw cards based on how many bird encounters it has. They have Divine Visitation here as well. We're looking through, we got Ondu Inversion, we opt to keep that. The Celestis allows us to draw a discard. So we go for it. Disdainful Stroke, we discard that because we're not paying, or we're not playing it. Then we say go. Southern Tithe, we opt not to play that, or pay that. They get 2 tokens, or 2 treasure tokens instead of 1, because they have Anointed Procession out. We opt to go ahead and undo Inversion, which means to pops all permanents. One Ring will survive because it's got Indestructible as well. It's just a really good card. I should add it to this list, but I just haven't because I haven't updated this list in a while. I'll probably bring you guys an updated Azor list this week, because he is one of my favorite commanders just ever. He's just one of my favorite Magic cards just ever. Anyways, they're really far behind, land-wise. They're only at like 5 lands, we're at like 8. They play Scoot Swarm, so they're starting to catch back up. Scoot Swarm reads, when you play lands, he makes a 1/1 insect. If you have 6 or more lands, he instead makes a copy of himself. So it just keeps duplicating and gets out of control pretty quickly. We go ahead and opt to gain protection from creatures. Our creatures and us, we gain protection from creatures, means we can't be affected by creatures at all. Because what protection does is that if you're affected by that type of card, or you got a protection from a color, if it directly affects the card, protection stops it. Toscodia's Welcome comes down, which that draws them a card once per turn if they have a creature with attack 1 or it's like 2 or less attack come into play. One Ring keeps drawing them cards of powering through their deck. They're starting to catch back up real quick. Vanquish the Horde, because our Angel's kind of insurmountable for them. Jawari's Disruption. We have to draw them from Dreams here. Grab the Fairy. They were thinking, grabbing Banishing Light here. I'm pretty sure we bind up the Ring. Because that's the thing with the One Ring, is that it's a card that just goes in every deck. It's borderline busted. They nerfed it because it used to be free to draw the card. It didn't cost the 1 mana. But since they nerfed it, I think it's a little bit more reasonable. I do like the card, though it is incredibly busted, but, I mean, it's 4 mana, and it's colorless, so it gives every deck a decent draw option. And that burning yourself with the bird encounters, that starts to add up pretty quick, so you gotta be careful of that stuff. Anyhoot, we play Teferi Hero Dominaria. We go ahead and clear the mind, reshuffling our graveyard. And we untap 2 lands. We're thinking here. There's Yasharn Implacable Earth, which he can grab 2 lands from the deck, and he has an ability that stops treasure tokens. It's basically what it does, because he has an ability no player can pay life or sacrifice permanents to activate abilities, which he shuts off treasure tokens. Which in one of my other playthroughs on Twitch, I just didn't record it at the time I played Yasharn. I'll show you guys my Yasharn decks. Yasharn is probably like one of the better Selesnya commanders, which means he's green and he's white. He's just one of the better ones in general. He's insanely good. They play Finale of Devastation here, where X equals 4, so that means they can tutor up a creature straight to the grave, or to the battlefield. I'm looking at my teeth there, to see if I have something stuck in my teeth. They go ahead and play Toski. What Toski does is he has an Indestructible, but whenever one of your creatures deals damage, he can draw you cards. And then over to Teferi, we send away our Banishing Light. We end up swiping up the Ring later. But now we can use his ability twice instead of just once, drawing us to untapping 4 lands total. the one ring activates. It checks if it has bird encounters, it doesn't. They draw a card. Then they play Maja finally. And then here they can see that was a life quit. Thank you for playing, opponent.
And then there's my plugs. You know, click the buttons and do the things. I'd really appreciate it. If you like the videos, say something. If you don't, also say something. Tell me what I can improve. Thank you. Have a wonderful day.